Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin, joined with Taylor. Getting ready to go over the DraftKings main slate. Just 4 games. I guess it's good compared to 10 games yesterday. It's like 10 games whenever you have like a really good lineup, then a bunch of other shit happens in the other games that you didn't have exposure to, and then you get completely sunk. I mean, good Lord, 10 threes by Dylan Brooks last night. All the stud centers went off, like every single one of them. Sabonis had a 20-20 triple-double. Anyways, I hate 10-game slates. 4 games is probably not quite enough games. I like to live in that 6-game range, and I bet Taylor agrees. Anyways, I'm Kevin. I'm Kevin. This is Taylor. I already said that. But if you're new to the channel, we break down every main slate for NBA DFS, pointing you to the best plays and trying to help you win money. If you need extra help, you can join our Discord, which is free. We drop core plays and we give advice up to lock. So today we're going to go position by position, starting at point guard. If any of this information and advice helps you in any way, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and join Discord to come join the community. All right, Trae Young leads the way up top, assuming he is in. Right now he's questionable. He missed last night. He has a 50-point fantasy projection going up against the Rockets. It's not a good spot, and he is not very owned. How are you feeling about Trae?
I like him a lot if he's not owned. It's a short slate. There are plenty of stars on it, but it seems like the ownership's going to be with guys like Curry and Dame and Giannis, maybe the Lakers. But Trae's kind of slipping through the cracks. I think the matchup and the Q tag will do that, but they're without Jalen Johnson still, so he does get a boost if he's in. Houston's also on the second half of back-to-back. Atlanta is too, but Trae wouldn't be, of course, after missing last night. I think it's an okay enough spot. And if he's unowned, I like it quite a bit. I'm happy to pay the extra money to get him over Dame and Curry, given the expected ownership discount. I think he's a pretty good play.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Trae. Obviously, there is the health concern and matchup concern. But if he is low owned on a 4-game slate, it's often tough to get a really good player with a massive ceiling like he can have at no ownership on a smaller slate. So I'm with you as far as the GPP play. Obviously, Curry looks really good here. He's not been great. I don't think he's even top 40 fantasy points in any of his last 5 games, maybe 5 games ago. But it's just he has not been very good. It's not. He's had a low floor. He's not had that that big high ceiling that we're used to seeing. But here he is against the Jazz, who give up a lot of 3-pointers and in general do not play very good defense. So, and actually specifically, they've allowed 3 point guards on the year to get to score 45 plus real points. So does that mean Curry is automatically going to come out and have like a 50-point, amazing shooting night? No. So if he's going to be super chalky, I have no problem going away from him. Right now, though, Dame at only $100 cheaper is the chalk at the point. So obviously he goes back to Portland, faces the Blazers. He just doesn't have as good of a projection as Curry or Trae or a lot of these guys up top. So how are you feeling about Dame? Do you want to eat the chalk, or do you want to kind of just let everybody else play Dame tonight?
Yeah, I think it's a spot where people just want to play him for the narrative of going back to Portland. Like, he's a good price and the matchup is good, but doesn't look amazing. Like, Giannis is in the same game. I think the matchup sets up better for Giannis than it does for Dame, honestly. So between the two, I'd much rather pay for Giannis and kind of let the field play Dame, especially because point guard is deep. Like, point guard is always the most loaded position, essentially. And it is, again, tonight on a 4-game slate. There are plenty of alternatives, so it's not like you have to play Dame. And I feel like, obviously, there's a ceiling there, but, I don't think he's any kind of must play. So I don't mind being under on him and Curry on this slate.
Yeah, it's tough to equate the revenge factor. He already did have this game. He already went back to Portland last year. He was fine, he had 25 points. But who's to say, now the second time there that he's just going to come out and go, ballistic here against the Blazers. Also, it's only a 6-point spread, but certainly there is blowout risk with a good and increasingly improving Bucks team facing the Blazers here. So, yeah, I think he's a fine play, but based off of projections and ownership, I don't think he's a must at all. The guy I do feel like is a must and currently a core play for me is Amen Thompson at 8K flat. He went off last night, hit the game winner against the Celtics. He's been very, very good. Really for a long time now, but recently 46 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. His floor games are not even that bad because he does so much when he's out there. There's a possibility Fred VanVleet is not in tonight, and the Rockets are definitely already without Tari Eason. So I don't think Tari moves the needle for Amen that much, but Fred VanVleet being out would dramatically raise his ceiling. And just in general, it's a matchup with the Hawks, which is one of the best matchups you can hope for. So I love Amen. He is a core play for me right now. I think if I had to just choose between him and the other point guards up top, I think I'm just going to play him. Obviously, you can still go get Trey on the other side at low ownership of that game, or get whatever point guard you want to pair with him. But then if you do that, you have to start thinking, am I going to fade Giannis? So how do you feel about Amen? And are there any other guys in that range that you like at point guard?
Yeah, I mean, he's the best overall play on the slate. I just think he's a very easy guy to roster. Like you said, he does everything when he's out there. He's also playing 40 minutes a night. Like, he does not get fatigued. They're favored tonight in Atlanta, even on the back-to-back for them. I guess it's a back-to-back for Atlanta as well. But good spot, not scared of the matchup. They're not going to put Daniels on him or anything. So at 8K, like, people didn't want to play him last night. Now everyone wants to play him. But even at ownership, I think he's going to be phenomenal. And it helps you can play him at small forward. I don't think playing him at point guard makes any sense at all. But he does have the eligibility. So guard forward is very useful. Just a great play. Really nothing to add. I think we shouldn't have glossed over Maxey without George and Embiid against the Lakers. The Lakers on a back-to-back. Not a good defensive team to begin with. Maxey is the most expensive point guard on the slate at 9.8 on DK. But again, without George and Embiid, he should be the offense for Philly. I do think the spot is pretty good. Again, like, if the field is going to play these Dame and Curry things in the upper eights, I don't think spending the extra 1K to get to Maxey is a bad idea at all. And then in Amen's range, we have Fred VanVleet as well. Because they released their injury report with Tari Eason out and Cam Whitmore questionable, I'm just assuming VanVleet is good to go now. So at 7-4, like, I don't love the back-to-back for him, but we think of him as an old, but I think he's like 30 years old. So it's not like he's actually an old, but they do monitor his minutes generally, or at least manage them with sitting him on back-to-backs and stuff. But if he's in at 7-4, I think Atlanta will put Daniels on Jalen Green, which should leave Trey or whatever weaker defender on VanVleet. And I think at 7-4 at no ownership, he's one of the better plays on the slate as well.
Yeah, certainly he is projecting to be low owned. I do think in that same projection range, Anthony Simons stands out a little bit more, save 1.3K. Get a run back from Dame or Giannis if you're playing them. I just think that's a little bit too cheap for Simons. Going to be a little bit more owned than FVV, but both look like solid plays. If no Trey, Dyson Daniels at 7.5 looks pretty good. His projection would only spike if that were to be the case. Austin Reeves at 7.8. If Brow or Braun end up randomly being ruled out, he's going to probably end up being a core play at that price. He's a fine play anyways. You can play him. I don't think I'd really prioritize him unless one of them missed, though. So going down here, Vit is only in play if Trey is out. And with Dyson Daniels back, I don't really love the 5.5K price. Not paying 6.9 for Scoot off the bench. Podziemski is an interesting one if we want to look for value here at point guard, because he is only 3.9K. He did play 24 minutes last game, and Utah is a great spot. I don't really want to play into ownership on Podziemski. Like, right now, he's not super owned, but I would not be shocked if he's a lot more owned than this, about 16.5%. So what do you feel about Podziemski, and what other values are you liking at point guard?
That's really it. I think this is pretty clearly a spot you want to spend salary at, with shooting guard and small forward and other positions having better cheap stuff. If I am paying down, it would be for Podziemski, but you can play him at shooting guard, which is helpful. 20 plus minutes off the bench in each of his first 2 games back. There's potential for blowout in this game, which I think would help him a little bit. Should have a role either way, though. So I don't care too much about the ownership. Like, there's a lot of suspicious value getting ownership on this slate. We'll talk about Philly in a second, but I think he's fine. I don't think he's any worse than guys like Justin Edwards or Ricky Council. So at 3.9 on DK, I'm happy to play Podziemski.
All right, so one other scenario would be if Trey is out. So Keaton Wallace would still be in play at 4.6. How would you feel about Wallace if that situation arises?
I wouldn't think he's a smash. Like, he was a smash last night because they were also without Dyson Daniels, and Daniels is going to be back tonight with Reese Shea off the injury report, which means Wallace is probably going to play off the bench. So not quite as appealing as he was last night in that starting role. I think he'd be okay, but I don't think he'd be any kind of priority, especially given the bad matchup.
No, I think given the lack of value, if Trey was out, he would definitely be in my player pool and on my radar, but he would not be a core play due to the spike hike or the price hike. And then obviously those other guys all being there for Atlanta. So we agree there. All right, over to shooting guard we go. Jalen Green leads the way. Really good projection, but your note about Dyson Daniels is always a little bit worrisome, especially since he's in a bit of a rut at the moment. I tend to want to just overlook that though, because the game environment is great. The ownership is not very high, and his projection is really nice for the 7.3 K price tag. So I like Jalen Green a lot right now. He's currently a core play with Amen. The Daniels thing is always a little bit scary, but it's the NBA. These guys are used to getting draped by good defenders. So I think he looks awesome. Right behind him is Daniels. Daniels is kind of okay if Trey is in, but I don't really want him if that's the case. If Trey's out, Daniels looks awesome. Simons is right behind him. I just think he's the better point per dollar play. Oubre looks really good with no PG-13. So I'll stop there. How do you feel about those guys? Is there anybody else up top that you like at shooting guard?
Not really. Shooting guard doesn't really have a lot at the top to begin with. I
Yeah,
do
that's
think
true.
Simons is the best play of the three you mentioned. Just the price is really good, like you said, at 6-1. Milwaukee against high usage guards and not a very imposing matchup. No Middleton in all likelihood, and no Portis, so they might not be quite as strong as they usually are on either end of the floor. So I like it for Simons, even though generally he's been pretty underwhelming for a while now. Green and Daniels are okay. I think Daniels is fine without having played last night, but never the most exciting guy to pay 7.5 for, given his kind of low usage. But the absence of Daniels and the potential absence of Young would make him a lot better. So don't mind it. Jalen Green's fine, but Cam Whitmore, I think, is the best play at this position. He's questionable, didn't play last night, but Tari Eason's out, Jabari Smith's still out. Minutes should be pretty secure for him. He's 3.8. He's guard forward eligible. He's a very good per minute producer, happy to shoot when he's out there. Atlanta awful, of course, defensively for the most part. If he's in, Whitmore looks like the best cheap play on the entire slate. So we're kind of finding ourselves with a lot of rockets at these guard spots, but I think it's such a fantastic spot that I have no issue with it at all.
Yeah, Whitmore looks great. He's questionable right now. What does that mean for you if Whitmore and Tari, and obviously Jabari has been out? What does that mean for you if those guys are all out? Does it just help the starters, or is there another value there we can look at?
I don't really think it would unlock a lot of extra cheap value. Like, I guess you could play Jayshawn Tate, but I really don't want to do that. Unless he would randomly start, which he wouldn't because they're not missing any starters. So I think the starters for Houston are the ones you want to focus on to begin with. Like, if Jeff Green and Jayshawn Tate beat me, I'm okay with that, and I will play again tomorrow.
That's true. All right, yeah, I am not into 7K Colin Sexton. The Jazz are getting healthy. The value with Utah right now probably just exists with their bigs, if at all. Max Christie at 4.2K. Rui is back, but Christie played 39 minutes last game. He starts. He plays 30-plus minutes every time. I think he's a pretty good value at 4.2. We already mentioned Podziemski. Kamara is okay. I mean, they're getting healthier too, Portland. I feel like that feels a bit chasey because he had been negatively impacted by all these guys coming back. And then he's come back a little bit. Last few games, he's looked really good. So I feel like that might be a trap. But in theory, Kamara at 5.6 is fine. Not super interested in Shadon Sharp. He is not adjusted well going back to the bench. Buddy Hield. I mean, it's the Jazz. If he gets 20-plus minutes, you can do it if you want to. Not really feeling it myself. Gary Trent at 4.1K. I think you mentioned Trent. I do have a little bit of interest in him at 4.1 because there's no Bobby and possibly no Middleton. So there's going to be a little bit more minutes there potentially. Obviously, there's blowout risk here. Blazers are a good matchup. He hasn't been amazing, but he has been okay
Revenge.
In a limited role. Huh?
Revenge.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, AJ Green is back too, so maybe that cuts into him a little bit, but I think he's an okay value. I don't really see anybody else that stands out. I don't really want to pay 5.7K for Jordan Clarkson, who still seems to be limited. But yeah, so I think
there are a few more. I think, like you mentioned, Oubre, he's a really good play guard forward.
For sure.
I think Moody at the same price as Podziemski with guard forward is also super interesting. Projected to be pretty popular as well, but without Kuminga and Green, there's usage to go around. He's a decent per minute guy off the bench. I think he's a fine value at sub 4K. Bogdan Bogdanovic did not play last night, even though he was not on the injury report, which is pretty maddening, but I assume it had to do with the back-to-back. I assume he's going to play tonight. He's 4'8" with guard forward, no Jalen Johnson, potentially no Trae Young. I think he's someone you can consider if Trae Young is out especially, but obviously it's not a safe play.
Yeah, and he's pushing 5K. I don't know. I don't know if I could do it, especially after last night. But in theory, if we know Boggy is going to get 25 minutes off the bench and a decent usage rate, he would be appealing most of the time. Yeah, I don't mind the Moody call. I think if I'm going to do the Warriors dive thing, I'd probably just go with Pod, but they both are in play for sure. All right, over to small forward we go. Amen Thompson, we already talked about him. He leads the way by far. It's a big free fall to get to Denny Avdia, who I actually
Horrible
do like.
Position.
Oh, it's really bad, but I actually don't like. I don't mind Denny at 7.2. If you want to leverage Amen Thompson ownership, that's not what I would do, but you also could just close the slate with him. He does have a ceiling. You know, he is still starting. He's been playing well. He had a really good game last game against OKC of all teams. So not a safe play, not the best projection, certainly not cheap, but he is a good GPP play on a 4-game slate. Lowry should, in theory, have a good usage rate, but the projected minutes are not great. Warriors are not a great matchup. 7.7K price. I'm not in love with it. So really what I'm doing here is I'd put Amen here, or I'd be looking at some of the values we already talked about, like Cam Whitmore. There's also some other interesting values for Philly. There's Justin Edwards and Ricky Council. I think both are fine plays. I probably would lean towards which one starts, but I'm okay with either because they're both going to get minutes with PG-13 out and the Sixers down to basically one useful big in Yabu. So I think they both will get 25 to 30 minutes here. There's also Wiggins. The price has come up 6.8K. That is a bit of a hefty price tag, but honestly, him and Curry are the only Warriors I trust at this point, and the matchup with Utah is awesome. He's been pretty darn good lately too, so I do not mind Wiggins, especially if he's going to go overlooked, which it looks like he will.
Yeah, I think I'd rather play Avdia, especially if Ayton's out in that range. Like, it's so bad at this position. 6'8" for Wiggins seems steep for me. So it's Amen, and then a massive gap. Like, I'd rather play someone that's in the 4K range before I'd play Avdia or Wiggins. But like I said, Avdia is okay enough. But otherwise, you're probably punting. I guess DeAndre Hunter maybe in the mid-range, but the issue with DeAndre Hunter is he scored 35 real points last night and finished with 39 fantasy points. So you really need him to score a ton to hit his ceiling, and even then his ceiling is like okay. So it's not something you're super excited about. But he's semi-cheap. 5.7 is okay enough, especially if Trae is out. The Edwards and Council thing, like, it's really tough. Council might start, but Edwards, I saw, was projected for more minutes off the bench. Not a comfortable play, either of them, but they're cheap. Edwards looks like he's going to be the chalkier of the two as of now. That's chalk I don't mind getting away from. Someone like Moody as a pivot, I think, is essentially the same play. So if Edwards is out of control chalk and Moody is not, we'll just play Moody instead. Beyond that, the Krejci, like we talked about, Torian Prince, I think, is the one cheap buck that I would have on my radar at 4.2. 30 plus minutes in theory without Middleton and Portis for Milwaukee. So I think he's okay if you're looking for a punt. Gary Payton is 3.2. Pretty good per minute guy. The issue is the Warriors rotation is a nightmare, but if he starts or something and plays 15 to 20 minutes at 3.2, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I liked Prince a lot with if Middleton's out as well, because Bobby's already out. We know Prince is going to get about 30 minutes probably. And if Middleton is out, that's pretty cemented. And the matchup with the Blazers is good. So I don't mind that. I would definitely play the ownership angle just because there's a lot of interesting plays in that range. There's Max Christie at 4.2, Prince at 4.2, Moody, Edwards, Trent, Guy Santos at 4.1. A lot of these guys are the same price. They're kind of the same player as far as like production. So yeah, I would just play, like, if Edwards is going to be mega chalk, just go find one of those other dudes in that same price range that you prefer. I like Edwards just fine. And I don't like hate eating the chalk there necessarily if you're going to get different high up instead. But I just think that might be a pretty easy way to get different is just go away from one of the cheapies that are really owned. All right. So power forward Giannis comes away with the best projection of the entire slate, 61 fantasy points. He's going to be owned because he's Giannis. and it's 4 games late. He is not cheap. He's 11.7K. There's a little bit of blowout risk here against a bad Blazers team, but it does have a 6-point spread, and it has a really nice 229.5 total. So, I mean, in theory, this is a total smash spot for Giannis, and we're probably stupid for considering fading him. I'm going to play him. Probably like go over the field here. But where are you at on Giannis?
Yeah, I like him quite a bit. I'm going to have at least the same amount as the field. I may go over, but I do like the spot for Anthony Davis quite a bit against Yabusele, so we'll get to that in a bit. I don't think Giannis is a must. I think there's enough mid-range where you can kind of live in that without paying all the way up a near 12K Giannis, but matchup's great. If Aiden's out, it gets even better. No qualms with it whatsoever, honestly.
All right, so right behind him is LeBron. I mean, second leg of a back-to-back, 40-year-old LeBron, 10K. How are you feeling about that?
I'm not really interested. I mean, obviously it's LeBron, and you can always play LeBron. Like Philly without George and Embiid is not an imposing defense, but it's just kind of pricey. I think I'd rather pay up for some of those guards. Like Maxi's cheaper. Every point guard is cheaper than LeBron, so I think the point guards are just better plays. Like LeBron's someone that'll be in my pool, not someone I'm going to be fading entirely in a multi-lineup set, but it's really hard to have a lot of confidence in him on a back-to-back or make him any kind of priority. So more of a secondary consideration.
Yeah, especially with this ownership. Maxi's less owned. I didn't check Brow's ownership yet. I'd imagine he'd be somewhat owned. I mean, he's a little bit less owned than LeBron. I mean, if LeBron's actually going to be this owned, you have Trey, you have Maxi, you have the point guards we talked about. Some of them are not necessarily going to be less chalky than him, but they're just grading out as probably better plays because they're significantly cheaper. Famous last words. I'm not into LeBron at all on this slate, so he'll probably get 70 or something stupid. But you can always play LeBron. But if he's going to be chalky, like 25%, like I'm not into that. Moving on, we have Denny, where we talked about all these guys except for Yabu. You mentioned Yabu. Obviously, he's going to have to go up against Brow. That's not great, but he is only 6K and no Embiid or Drummond. So in theory, he's a pretty good low mid-range option and offers some value here. And if he's in, he is probable, never mind. But he should get like about 35 minutes if he can avoid foul trouble. I don't hate him. Not a priority for me, but he looks fine.
Who was that?
Yabu.
Yeah, I think he's fine. 6K is kind of getting up there for him. Like he's pretty close to his ceiling, but the minutes are pretty safe. He was awful in the last game, which was really frustrating, but what are you going to do? The Lakers on a back-to-back, so it's fine. I just hate Philly value. Like every time I play the Philly value, it fucking sucks. So I'm fully expecting it to fucking suck again, but
I mean,
it is what it is.
If you're going to, I don't think he's the first one I'd go to. I think I'll just punt and like Edwards or Council. Hopefully they work. Like they're cheap enough on a 4-game slate that they're not going to completely sink you. I don't think. And they could be the difference.
Yeah, they could sink you.
I mean, I just doubt it. Because in that range, there's like everybody's so similar. Like they all can tank you.
Yeah. So
Max Christie can get you 10. So like.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they can all get you 10, why am I playing a 40% on Ricky Council and not a 3% on Rui for like $300?
Oh no, 100%. No. I'm just saying. I would play the one that isn't going to be super owned. I can't imagine they're both mega chalk because there's other viable plays.
Yeah, but I feel like Council's projected to start, so it seems like he'll be pretty popular. And then Edwards is like super popping in projections around the industry, so he's going to be popular. So Rui is 4.6. He's probable with a cap thing. I don't think he'll be really limited. I don't really think he's a very different play than Ricky Council at 4.3, yet there's a massive gulf in the current ownership. So very easy pivot to Rui. Max Christie, like you said, if he's going to be less owned than these Sixers guys, I have no issue with that. Guy Santos, kind of the same thing. Like he's 4-1 now, and he's Guy Santos, but they're playing Utah. He's played 20 plus minutes in like 5 of the last 6. I really don't think there's a big difference between these guys. So the ownership being really steamed on the Sixers just makes me want to not play them and play like Taurean Prince or Dylan Brooks instead.
Yeah, Dylan Brooks. Dylan Brooks is like, You look up in the dictionary of what a DFS trap would be. It's going to be Dylan Brooks. Oh, 10 made threes. Let's go play 4.9K Dylan Brooks against the Hawks. He will not make a single three tonight, probably.
Probably not. But if he's going to be low owned and he's 4.9 playing 35 minutes against the Hawks, sign me up.
Do not sign me up, but he would remain in my player pool. Like, I'm not just gonna be like, yeah, I'm gonna play Dylan Brooks, but he's okay.
I'm not excited about it for sure, but I do
Yeah.
think he's viable because he's cheap
Oh,
and no Tari, no Bari.
100%. 100%. I like the Rui thing because this is what I think we need to think about. It's like all these guys are similar, but like which of them are actually good? Like,
None
let's
of
get
them.
it. Well, Rui is better than Council or Justin Edwards for sure. So that's what I'm saying. Like, Rui is an interesting, specific, isolated call because he's actually a pretty good bench player. Well, actually,
Starter.
He starts. Yeah, no, so I would feel a lot better about Rui, to be honest. I like that call a lot. But that's the kind of thing we have to think about a little bit more, especially if everybody's going one way. You need to think, like, is there a reason I should be zagging when everybody's zigging?
Yeah,
you know?
Especially in like Justin Edwards, people hadn't heard of 2 weeks ago. Ricky Council's been a bench warmer for his entire career. Like, and suddenly these guys are 40% owned. So,
well, I think it's like just like
get away from.
It's just like an obvious situation, right? There's no PG-13, there's no Embiid, so somebody has to soak up the usage. I would say the best way to attack that is Maxey and Oubre. You know, like, these guys are definitely risky.
Yabu Sele.
Yeah. To a lesser degree, Yabu, just because I think it's going to be a problem for him with Brow for sure. Maybe Adam Bona or Bana.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Bona it is. Okay. So and it's ugly out there, but the nice thing is, like you said, small forward and power forward both. Unless you're paying up for Giannis, I mean, you can really just punch. Just make sure you're very selective with your punts.
I think one more name to throw into the mix is John Collins. I think he's questionable, but he's been so good all season per minute when he's in. He's 6'4", which is pretty cheap relative to where he's been for much of the year. Concerned about the minutes, but if he's in at 6'4" at under 10% owned, I think you can include him in a pool.
Yeah, a tournament play for sure. Don't love the minutes. I probably won't go there, but it is a GPP play. All right, over at center, Giannis still there. There's Anthony Davis, who we talked about. He had a monster 42 and 23 game last night, had 75 fantasy points. If you played him, hats off to you. 10.5K against the Sixers. He's just too cheap. The only thing is he really going to go do that again? Probably not. He still looks like a really good play on the slate, though. Second leg back-to-back, possible blowout. Those are real factors to consider. And, of course, there's Giannis above him. I think Giannis is safer, and Giannis has the better ceiling. But it's not like Davis is way far away and you save 1.2K. So certainly, if you want to do that at less ownership, you can. There's also Şengün, who looks pretty darn good against the Hawks. I have no problem with saving even more money and going to Şengün if you'd like to. And Yeka looks good at 6.6K with no Jalen Johnson and possibly no Trey again. He did not pan out yesterday, but he has been smashing. So if Trey's out, I like Onyeka a lot. If Trey's in, I think he's okay, but I'm not as excited to play him. Why don't we stop there and you can touch on any of those guys and give your thoughts?
Yeah, I do have more Giannis than AD as of now. Giannis has power forward, so that comes in handy. But like you said, AD is considerably cheaper. The matchup is just as good, maybe better with no Embiid or no Drummond in there. So totally fine with AD. He doesn't have to do what he did last night in order to pay off, especially on a small 4-game slate. So happy to get to him quite a bit. Şengün, I'm getting to a lesser extent, but you know, he's always in play. His ceiling has been pretty erratic. He's been very boom or bust this season. So 9K seems a bit steep for that volatility, but it's okay enough. The Hawks are not a very imposing defense. Kessler at 7-1, if he's in, I believe he's questionable as a fine play. Golden State against centers, like, they just don't have size. Trace Jackson Davis is an awful defender. They're kind of cycling through the center rotation right now. So Kessler, I think, is a pretty interesting play that's not going to be owned at 7-1. Collins, I mentioned. Yabusele, we talked about. Ayton is 6'3". If he's in, never love Ayton, but he is pretty cheap. We have seen the occasional upside from him. I don't think he's a bad tournament play either.
Yeah, if Ayton is in, I mean, Ayton's fine at that price because we know he's talented and he's capable. Projection is not amazing. I think the real thing is he's weirdly played Giannis really well in the past. So slight cause for pause if Ayton is in, because they maybe get a slight defensive boost with him in. If he's out, I would have no fear whatsoever with Robert
Klingon,
Williams and Klingon hacking. Hacking Giannis. If Ayton is out, though, obviously you do have the value with Klingon and Time Lord. So I think they're viable center punts if you want to do that. I think if Robert Williams is still power forward eligible. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. That can come in handy at 4.2K. So they're fine. I want no part with the Warriors situation. I don't know what is going on there. They have Kevon Looney. They have Jackson Davis.
You don't want Quentin Post?
I mean, no, not really. I think at 3.4K, it's not the worst punt in the world, just because he's
like compared to the other value we've talked about.
Dude, he's just a big lumbering oaf, but he's also a really good outside shooter.
He can shoot.
If he's just gonna get like 15 to 20 minutes and just jack up threes against a bad 3-point defending team like Utah, I'm okay with it. It's not the worst punt in the world. I think he's only center eligible, but whatever. So he's there. He's actually weirdly viable, especially since Steve Kerr is an asshole and you never know what he's going to do. He'll probably just start Quentin Post out of nowhere. And, honestly, maybe he should, because at least he gives you range, whereas Looney and Jackson Davis don't give as much. Looney gives you none. So I think
it looks like Steven Adams is like kind of owned, and I think I would just rather play Post in that range, because Adams on a back-to-back, like there's no telling how much he'll play. Like I'll just play Post for 100 or more.
I'm just definitely not going to play Steven Adams. He's actually been pretty good lately.
Yeah, but he plays like 15 minutes at the most. So
right, he was not on my radar at all. So thank you for bringing him on my radar, so I can definitely not play him.
I think Capella is also worth a look, just because he's still like Okongwu is now starting, but Capella is still playing 20-ish a night, and he's very good per minute.
Yep.
He was the one who smashed last night at Okongwu's expense. So Capella at 4.6, like we've talked about these shaky wing values. People aren't really going to want to pay down at center. I think Brook Lopez is also in this conversation, but he's 5'7". If Portis is out and Middleton is out, Lopez.
Look at the minutes Brook Lopez has been playing, though. I love to see that. Dude cannot rebound for shit, and if he's not hitting threes, he's not going to do anything.
He's the worst center to play because he does not rebound, but
he does block shots. He does block shots, and he can hit threes, so he's getting you bonus points. Honestly, I don't hate it because the matchup is good. No Bobby and possibly no Middleton, so his usage could increase. I think it's actually a pretty good play. Don't love the price. I don't love that the price went up. But everything else looks honestly pretty good. I love the minutes for Brook, so that's cool. I also, by the way, love the Capella call. If Trey is in and I'm already going to be off on Onyeka, I like that as like a leverage play if Onyeka does carry any ownership. And even if he doesn't, 4.6K with Onyeka having to deal with Şengün potentially getting in foul trouble or just struggling maybe, and then Capella could get a few more minutes. And by the way, revenge.
Yeah.
So you never know. I just think I agree. 4.6K, kind of just prefer him over the Blazers centers at this point. That same price range just feels. I mean, he's a better per minute guy.
If Klingon is starting, I would still prefer Klingon, even though there's foul risk. But he's so good per minute also that Klingon as a starter, I think I would prefer over Capella. But Capella is pretty interesting too.
I don't know though, because obviously he has to contend with Giannis all game. That's not good. He's got a minute limit. That's not good. And if he would just be at best splitting with Time Lord. So
Capella's not going to play a ton of minutes either, to be fair.
No, true. I just feel like I trust Capella a little bit more. I think he's just a more reliable player. But they're all in play. They're very similar plays. I think it's just going to come down to like if one of those guys is like crazy owned. Like right now, they're not carrying any ownership, any of them. I mean, I will say Time Lord being power forward eligible is pretty useful. So if like Time Lord started, you can slide him at power forward instead of like, Christie or something. That could be interesting. But yeah. All right. So let's wrap it up with our flag plant and overall strategy for the night.
I think it's not going to be like a guy that I'm flag planting. I think it's more just the strategy would be to play some of these lower owned cheap guys and not really eat the hardcore Sixers value or Golden State value. Like there's enough alternative options to where you can get different with your values. It's not like the cheap value right now is very safe. So like Quentin Post or Torian Prince or Capella, like we talked about. Like these guys are all playable. They all have semblance of ceiling for the dollar. So fine with that. If I am in a flag plant of value, it's going to be Cam Whitmore. I assume the field will be there on him, but if he's in, he's just easily the best of that cheap wing value group.
Yeah, I think my main flag plant is just going to be Amen and Jalen Green. I don't love that Jalen might be matched up with Daniels, but they both project really, really good in a really good matchup against the Hawks, and they're not as owned as they probably should be. They would both remain way too cheap. The reality, like Jalen Green has not been very good lately, but this is a spot where he could certainly catch fire. And then also just to consider like leverage plays, like we kind of just touched on it. Like Onyeka, I didn't even notice this. He's carrying 30% ownership. So if he's actually going to be that chalky, I like Capella even more. So just really play into the possibility that he could struggle, against Şengün, and then maybe Capella gets a little bit more run than usual, or just at 4.6K, Capella is just also, in addition to possible leverage on the same guy from the same team, or guy from the same team, he could be leverage on other guys in that same price range. So, and I also agree with your point on just don't like blindly buy into the chalky value on this slate. I know it's only 4 games. There's only so much to consider, but like if everybody's playing Ricky Council and or Justin Edwards, I agree. We should be considering what else is out there for sure. Oh, and the last thing is, I think I'm just going to play Giannis. I mean, I don't see Brow doing that 2 games in a row, and Giannis as the best ceiling. So I'm very hopeful that, especially if Trey is in, the Giannis ownership starts dipping a little bit. I don't know. He's not going to be contrarian really, but hopefully he's not like 60% owned in my tournament. All right, so that does it for us. Hopefully this helps you out. If it does, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and come join us in our Discord. Thanks for watching, and good luck.